What happens when America's most polished journalist collides with the royal family's most controversial export? At first, it looks like just another primetime sit-down, a comfortable studio, polite greetings, and the illusion of civility. But beneath the warm lights of CNN, Anderson Cooper didn't come to play along, and Meghan Markle didn't come to be humbled. She came armed with defiance, dismissive smiles, and that sharp edge of entitlement that has polarized audiences worldwide. What began as a conversation quickly turned into combat, verbal fencing, where one side wielded facts and the other wielded attitude. By the time the mask slipped, the world had witnessed something far more than an interview. They had witnessed a reckoning. The CNN studio gleamed under the carefully calibrated lights. Everything about the set was pristine. Anderson Cooper, the immaculate alignment of his cue cards, the deliberate stillness of the cameras waiting to capture every angle. Across from him sat Meghan Markle, perfectly poised, legs crossed, her glossy hair catching the light like a halo. She offered that practiced smile that had graced countless magazine covers, the smile that seemed designed to disarm and charm. Meghan, Anderson began smoothly. "Thank you for joining us tonight." "Of course," she said, her tone sweet, but laced with something faintly performative. "It's always enlightening to sit down with real journalists." Anderson caught the subtle sting in her words, but didn't bite. He only inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Let's begin with something simple. How are you and Harry doing?" For a fleeting second, Meghan's smile froze, an almost imperceptible shift. Then she leaned back slightly, exuding a casual air. "We're fine. We're thriving. Stronger than ever, actually. In spite of what the tabloids would love for people to believe." Her voice carried a sharp edge now, each syllable polished to sound definitive, even defensive. Anderson nodded, maintaining a steady gaze. "There have been rumors, some suggesting that there's tension in the marriage, that Harry struggles with being so far removed from his family, and that rumors," Meghan cut in with a light laugh, though the laughter was brittle. "Do you really want to waste your time giving oxygen to gossip?" "Honestly, Anderson, I'd expect better of you." The studio audience, invited guests seated behind the cameras, shifted uncomfortably. The dismissal was pointed, almost disrespectful. Anderson, however, remained the picture of composure. "I understand your frustration with rumors," he said evenly, "but part of the public's interest lies in how you both are adjusting, given the very public step you took away from royal life. Isn't it fair to ask how you're navigating those changes?" Meghan's smile tightened. "Navigating?" she repeated as though tasting the word. "We don't navigate, we lead. We've made choices that serve our happiness, our truth. If people can't handle that, perhaps they should stop projecting their unhappiness onto us." The words rang with condescension. What was meant to be an answer sounded more like a rebuke. Anderson's expression didn't flicker. He shuffled his cards slightly, a movement so subtle, it was almost a silent challenge. "So, let's talk about choices, then," he continued. "You've been vocal about your difficulties with the royal family. You've described feeling unsupported, even silenced, but you've also built a very successful platform since stepping away. Podcasts, streaming deals, book contracts. Critics argue that you've leveraged the very institution you condemn. What would you say to them?" Meghan tilted her head, the smile returning, colder this time. "I'd say those critics should try walking a mile in my shoes before they make uninformed judgments. I don't apologize for surviving, Anderson. I don't apologize for making a living after being cut off." Her tone had grown sharper, louder. What had begun as a conversation was already teetering into confrontation. Anderson leaned forward, voice calm and measured. "But Meghan, it wasn't as if you were left destitute. You had a successful acting career before Harry. He has inherited wealth. The perception, fair or not, is that the narrative of financial struggle doesn't align with reality. How do you reconcile that?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Perception," she said, practically spitting the word. "That's the problem, isn't it? Everyone thinks they're entitled to analyze our lives like characters in a play. They don't know the truth. They don't know what we sacrificed." Anderson let the silence breathe for a moment, letting the audience feel the weight of her indignation. Then softly, "What exactly did you sacrifice, Meghan?" The question landed like a stone dropped in still water. For the first time, Meghan hesitated. Her lips parted, but the words came slower now, less rehearsed. Privacy, she said finally. Peace. The right to live without being torn apart daily by people who have never even met us. Anderson nodded thoughtfully, but there was a flicker of steel in his blue eyes. Yet here, you are sitting in front of millions telling your story on your terms. Does that not contradict the desire for privacy? Meghan bristled. It's not contradiction, it's control. We choose what to share. That's our right. Of course, Anderson agreed smoothly, but that also makes you public figures who can be questioned on the choices you make. You can't ask for privacy and also command a global spotlight without scrutiny. That's the balance journalism demands. The audience hummed with tension. Meghan crossed her legs more tightly, her hands clasping together in her lap. The mask of charm was thinning, and something colder was seeping through. Balance? She echoed, her voice dripping disdain. Funny, Anderson, you talk about balance, yet you sit there with the same smug authority as every other man who's ever tried to diminish me. The words hit like a slap in the quiet studio. Anderson blinked once slowly, but his voice remained calm, even gentle. I'm not diminishing you, Meghan. I'm holding you accountable. There's a difference. Her laugh was sharp, humorless. Accountable to whom? To you? To the press that twists every word I say? To a public that's already made up its mind about me? Anderson didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Accountable to the truth, he said simply. The silence that followed was deafening. The opening act of what was supposed to be a measured discussion had already ignited into a sparring match. And for the first time, Meghan's polished composure looked fragile. The cameras rolled smoothly, but the atmosphere inside the CNN studio had shifted. The polished civility of the opening had evaporated, leaving something raw, something more volatile. Anderson Cooper sat composed, pen poised between his fingers, while Meghan Markle's posture grew taut, her charm slipping into irritation. Anderson's next card was deliberate. He didn't glance at it. He already knew the question. Meghan, let's talk about Harry. He's spoken often about the toll this has taken on him, the distance from his family, the loss of the military roles he once valued so deeply. How was he adjusting? Meghan's expression froze for a fraction of a second. Then came the practiced smile, though sharper now, like glass under light. Harry is thriving. He's never been happier. Actually, we've built a life that finally reflects our values. So, no, Anderson, he's not pining for the past. If that's what you're insinuating. Anderson nodded calmly. I'm not insinuating, Meghan. I'm asking. There are reports. Reports? Meghan cut in, her tone clipped. From which tabloids? The same ones that have stalked us, lied about us, and profited from our suffering. Please, we don't dignify rumors. The audience shifted again, sensing the bite in her words. Anderson, unshaken, continued in that steady, surgical voice. Not just tabloids. There have been whispers from those close to the family suggesting Harry feels isolated, caught between two worlds. Do you acknowledge that's a possibility? Meghan's eyes narrowed. Do you acknowledge that maybe Harry makes his own choices? That maybe, just maybe, grown man can decide for himself where he's happiest? Or do you prefer the narrative that I somehow control him? Anderson leaned forward slightly, his voice low, calm, but edged with unmistakable firmness. It's not about control, Meghan. It's about the fact that before you, Harry was one of the most beloved members of the royal family. He had a role, a purpose, a deep connection with the British public. Since stepping away, much of that has eroded. So, it's a fair question. Has your marriage cost him more than it's given him? The question hung in the air like a live wire. Meghan's jaw tightened, and for the first time her voice cracked with heat. That is insulting. We are partners, equals. Harry didn't lose anything. He gained freedom. He gained love. He gained me. Anderson's gaze didn't waver, and in exchange, he lost his family, his titles, his country's affection. Was that a trade worth making? Meghan's laugh was sharp and humorless. You sound like one of those bitter royalists who thinks the crown is sacred. Let me remind you, Anderson, We're not living in the 18th century. Harry doesn't need to bow and scrape for anyone's approval. There was an audible murmur from the studio audience. Her words, dripping with disdain, landed like a hammer blow. Anderson inhaled slowly, maintaining his poise. Let's pivot then. Before Harry, you had a successful acting career. Many people knew you from Suits. Do you ever regret leaving that behind? Walking away from a professional identity of your own? Meghan tilted her head, smirking faintly. Regret? Hardly. I outgrew it. Playing dress-up on a TV set is nothing compared to the impact I've made on a global stage. I didn't trade down Anderson, I traded up. The arrogance in her tone was unmistakable. Anderson's brows rose slightly, but his voice remained even. Some might argue you traded independence for notoriety. That you went from being Meghan Markle, actress, to Meghan and Markle, Duchess of Sussex, defined primarily by your husband's name. Meghan's composure cracked again. That's sexist and reductive. I am more than my husband's wife. Of course, Anderson said smoothly. But without Harry, would you be sitting here on this stage in front of millions? Would Netflix and Spotify have offered those contracts? Would publishing houses have chased your story? Meghan's lips tightened into a thin line. Her voice, when it came, was colder. You clearly don't understand who I am. I've always had influence. I've always had presence. The world just wasn't ready to acknowledge it until I forced them to. Anderson let the silence stretch, his calm demeanor only sharpening the contrast with her rising hostility. Then he asked softly but pointedly, or did the world only notice because of the crown attached to your name? The blow landed. Meghan's eyes flashed and her breath caught audibly in the microphone. She leaned forward now, her tone openly confrontational. You don't get to decide my worth, Anderson. And frankly, your line of questioning is insulting. Anderson leaned back, utterly composed, his voice dropping into that calm, deliberate cadence that had dismantled presidents and CEOs alike. I'm not deciding your worth, Meghan. I'm asking if the worth you claim was truly earned or borrowed. The audience collectively inhaled, the tension now electric. Meghan's smile was gone, placed with something colder, anger laced with fear. The cracks in her carefully constructed armor were beginning to show. And for Anderson, that was the first sign that the real interview had only just begun. The studio air had grown heavy. Meghan Markle sat rigid in her chair, its pressed into a thin line, her earlier veneer of charm stripped away. Anderson Cooper, by contrast, remained the picture of composure. His notes rested neatly on the desk, but he hardly needed them. He had the cadence of a man who knew exactly where this interview was headed. And Meghan could feel it. Meghan, he began evenly, let's address what so many people are wondering. You've spoken about the pain of your time in the royal family, but you've also enjoyed global recognition because of it. Without that platform, without the crown's name, do you believe the world would still be listening to you now? Meghan's eyes narrowed. So what? You're saying I'm irrelevant without them? Anderson didn't flinch. I'm saying your voice was amplified by the institution you criticize. That's not judgment. It's fact. She leaned forward, her tone sharp. And I suppose you think I should have stayed silent, endured racism, endured being ignored when I begged for help, just so the monarchy's spotless image could stay intact. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing her rising hostility. Anderson's tone, however, remained maddeningly calm. I think there's a difference between speaking truth to power and building a brand around grievance. Many people respected your initial courage, but now some feel the story has become selective crafted. Meghan let out a bitter laugh. Selective? That's rich. Anderson, you sit there in your expensive suit behind your desk with your privilege and tell me how to tell my story. Anderson's eyes never wavered. Privilege is being born into a monarchy with palaces, staff, and global adoration. And yet, the British public, who once welcomed you with open arms, now seems divided at best. Why do you think that is? Her jaw tightened. Because the British media poisoned them against me. It's that simple. Anderson leaned in slightly, voice firm, but calm. Is it that simple? Or did the public's affection cool after decisions you made? Walking away from duties, criticizing the Queen's institution while still using its titles, moving to America, signing lucrative media deals. Meghan's eyes flashed. We had to move. We had to protect ourselves. From what? Anderson asked softly. From scrutiny? From responsibilities you agreed to when you married into that family? The words cut like glass. Meghan's carefully maintained control faltered, her voice rising. Responsibilities? You mean servitude? You mean smiling and waving while being treated like a burden? That's not a life, Anderson. That's a prison. Anderson let the silence stretch, then asked the question everyone in the room had been waiting for. Did Queen Elizabeth personally mistreat you? Meghan hesitated. A flash of calculation flickered across her face. Then came the dismissive smile. I have nothing but respect for the late Queen, she said, the words clipped, rehearsed. But the system she embodied, it was archaic. It was suffocating. Anderson's voice sharpened ever so slightly. So it wasn't her personally. It was the system, the monarchy. Exactly, Meghan said quickly, as if relieved to anchor herself in safer territory. Anderson nodded. And yet, it's the monarchy that gave you the platform, the attention, the influence. Without it, you were a supporting actress on a cable show. With it, you became a global figure. Does that not complicate your narrative? Her composure snapped. I don't need a crown to matter, Anderson. I never did. The monarchy needed me more than I needed them. I was the fresh air, the diversity, the modernity they couldn't produce on their own. Gasps rippled through the audience. The arrogance in her tone was undeniable. Anderson's lips pressed into a thin measured line. That may be how you see it. But from the outside, it looks different. The monarchy has existed for centuries. You were there for less than 2 years before walking away. Do you truly believe you changed it, or did it change you? Her laugh was sharp, defensive. I opened eyes. I exposed truths. That's more than most could have done. Anderson leaned back in his chair, gaze steady. Or perhaps you burned bridges and called it revolution. The silence that followed was crushing. Meghan's chest rose and fell quickly, her anger barely concealed. The audience sat frozen, caught in the tension. Anderson shuffled his notes, but didn't look down at them. Let's move to your decision to settle in America. Some say it's hypocritical. You left Britain citing a desire for privacy, but here, you've pursued podcasts, interviews, documentaries, each one amplifying the very attention you claim to despise. How do you reconcile that? Meghan's voice dripped disdain. It's called survival, Anderson. We were cut off. We had to provide for ourselves. Unlike the institution, nobody pays our bills anymore. Anderson's eyebrow lifted slightly, his voice still maddeningly polite. Except, of course, the streaming giants who paid tens of millions for your story. That doesn't exactly scream hardship. Meghan's cheeks flushed red. How dare you reduce everything we've endured to money? You think it's about wealth? It's about security, dignity, protecting our children. Anderson's reply was surgical. Protecting your children or protecting your brand? The blow landed hard. Meghan froze, lips parting, but no words coming. For the first time, she looked genuinely rattled. Anderson let the silence hang before speaking again, softly but decisively. Meghan, you left a 1,000-year-old institution claiming you wanted peace. But what you've built looks less like peace and more like a business. The audience erupted into a low murmur, sensing the interview spiraling into dangerous territory. Meghan's face hardened, but her voice shook with indignation. You don't get to define me, she snapped. You don't get to decide what my life means. Anderson's gaze was unflinching. I don't need to. The world is watching, and they see the contradictions. The tension was now unbearable. The interview that began with smiles had become a battlefield, and Meghan Markle was losing ground with every question. The studio was silent except for the faint hum of the lights. Meghan Markle sat stiffly in her chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles pale. The glossy composure that had carried her through so many interviews was gone, replaced with flashes of anger and thinly veiled panic. Anderson Cooper, still calm and deliberate, leaned forward as though he were dissecting a case in open court. Meghan, he began, voice measured, you've spoken about being silenced, about suffering, about leaving an institution that failed you. But let's be honest with each other and with the viewers at home. Would we be sitting here right now if you hadn't married Prince Harry? The question hit like a thunderclap. The audience collectively inhaled. Meghan's eyes flashed, but she forced a smirk. So now, you're saying nothing without him. How very predictable. Anderson's gaze didn't waver. I'm saying that your entire public identity, your global influence, your Netflix deals, your book contracts, all stem from one fact. You married into the most famous family in the world. And since leaving that family, you've built a career criticizing it while still trading on its name. Isn't that true? Meghan's voice rose, sharp and defensive. That's an incredibly sexist thing to say. I had a career before Harry. I was successful before Harry. I mattered before Harry. Anderson's reply was a scalpel delivered with devastating calm. Yes, Meghan, you were an actress on a mid-tier cable show. Talented perhaps, but not globally known. You became a household name the moment you put on that tiara and walked into Windsor. That's not sexism. That's reality. Her mouth opened, but no words came. The silence betrayed her. Anderson pressed on, his tone never rising, each word more cutting than the last. You've made millions from interviews, documentaries, podcasts, all on the back of a name you claim to despise. You say you were silenced, yet no one has spoken more than you. You say you wanted privacy, yet you've lived in the spotlight by choice. You say you were powerless, yet you've leveraged enormous power in shaping the narrative. Meghan, do you see the contradiction? Her composure cracked fully. You don't understand what I've been through, she snapped, her voice trembling. Now, you don't understand the pain, the isolation, the fear. You sit there judging me like you know my life, but you don't. Anderson leaned back, his face grave. I understand what you've told us, and what I see as a woman who wants all the benefits of royalty with none of the responsibilities. A woman who says she's independent, but whose platform collapses without Harry's name. Strip away the crown, the titles, the connections, and what's left? Meghan's lip quivered. She tried to steady herself, but her voice broke. I am more than his wife. I am more than a duchess. She faltered, her eyes glistening. I am. Her words dissolved into silence. And then, to the shock of everyone in the room, Meghan's eyes filled with tears. She turned her face away, blinking rapidly, her carefully composed persona shattering under the weight of the questions. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to pity her or applaud Anderson. Anderson's voice, still firm, but tinged with finality, cut through the tension. Meghan, this isn't cruelty. This is accountability. You've made accusations against powerful people who cannot defend themselves publicly. You've profited from those accusations. And when asked for specifics, for facts, for evidence, you fall back on emotion. That may win sympathy, but it doesn't answer the questions. Meghan shook her head, tears rolling. Now, you don't know what it's like. None of you know. Anderson exhaled slowly, then turned his eyes toward the camera. His closing words carried the gravity of a verdict. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just seen what happens when public narratives meet hard questions. Meghan Markle came here tonight to tell her version of the story. But journalism is not about versions. It's about truth. And sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. The camera slowly zoomed in on his face as he delivered the final blow. Titles and fame can amplify a voice, but they cannot replace substance. And without Harry's name, Meghan Markle would not be sitting here tonight. The words landed like a gavel. Meghan's head dropped, shoulders trembling, as Anderson placed his pen neatly on the desk. This interview, he said quietly, is over. The screen cut to black, leaving millions of viewers stunned. Some felt sympathy, others vindication, but all knew they had just witnessed one of the most explosive interviews in CNN history. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another story like this. We've got plenty more explosive interviews, celebrity meltdowns, and behind-the-scenes confrontations coming your way. Because when powerful people face tough questions, you never know how it's going to